What happened in COVID in this country was a disgrace.
23-year-old of France was bashed to death by a group of Antifa. He was a conservative man and he was just trying to protect a few women and cost him his life.
And I think that's the infection in politics today. They're affecting pre-selections. That means effectively they're bought and owned by these lobbyists.
It seems like the Liberal and Labor Party, especially on a federal level, have almost turned into one globalised party.
Pauline Hanson has been beavering away for 30 years. She's sought to work with them. They've rejected her. They put her in prison. They lied about her. The media have been terrible to her. Everything she's been saying, the public are catching on to.
They will keep voting Labor because that's what they were doing back then.
Yeah.
And even though it goes against them in terms of their orthodox Christianity or whatever they believe in.
They came here for a better way of life, not to change our way of life. As a father, as a husband, solve whatever problem is there for them and absorb pain so that they don't have to.
All right, everyone, we have a special episode. We're joined by Cory Bernardi, who's number one on the ticket for One Nation for the upper house here in South Australia, going for election soon. So, Cory, welcome. How's everything going?
Thanks, George. Going really well, actually. I've been out of the political game for nearly 6 years, and I have to say I'm taking back to it like a duck to water. Really having good times.
Yeah, I watched your speech you did with Carlos and Pauline. It was pretty good.
Thank you. Look, it's, when Pauline approached me about running for Parliament again, I considered it and really thought, why do I want to do it? And, so it's become an easy transition. It's about trying to help the state.
Yeah.
I don't mean that in any cliched way. I bought a business last year. I've been looking at how people are struggling in some of the regional areas where I work in and live in. And I just figure there's got to be someone that gets up there and wants to have a fight about the stuff that really matters.
Yeah, can you give us an insight? So you moved away from Sky, you moved out into the region. What's that been like for you on a personal level?
Yeah, I moved to Coffin Bay, which is where I live, just after I finished politics in 2020. I love that community. It's where I feel most at home and at peace. When on my time with Sky, I'd fly back, or sometimes I do it from my back bedroom. Technology's pretty wild now. But after 4 years at Sky, I just found myself getting a little bit bored and thought I've got to think about what I want to do. Ended up buying a business. We got an oyster tour business,
nice.
An oyster farm and a restaurant, which we've loved and enjoyed. And again, that ignited, I guess, this new energy in me thinking, hang on, I'm 56. It's not that old. It might be to some of your viewers, but it's not that old. I've got, another belt in me, and what do I want to do? I want to try and help some people. And that's, I think, a really good motivation to get back into politics.
So was being in that regional area, seeing the troubles there firsthand, did that have a huge impact on how you move forward with this new role?
Yeah, look, it does. Because there's a couple of things. There are challenges for regional communities, right? And people who choose to live in them like me, we accept these things that are necessary. Sometimes it is harder to get access to services. Sometimes transport routes are challenging, they're very expensive and so forth. But we choose to do it and we love it. We want to make that as good as possible for as many people as possible. But what really got me was the fact that the Liberal Party takes the seat I live in, Flinders, for granted, right? They've got a bloke there who's a local member who no one sees. I ask other business people, what do you think of the local member? Wouldn't know, don't know him, right? He doesn't seem that interested except at election time. The Labor Party thinks we can't win the seat, so we're not interested either. And so what originally floated in my mind was, well, if you really want to make a difference, why wouldn't you run as an independent? And that led to one conversation, to another conversation, to another conversation. And, eventually, because I've been a member of One Nation and supported them previously, we landed where we are now. And I'm happy about that because it gives me this statewide role like I had as a senator, but with an absolute focus on benefits for South Australia.
So your relationship with Pauline, obviously you worked together in the past. You were both in, for many, many years. Were you friends? Were you enemies? What was it like?
Depends what time of day it was. No, look, politics is one of those things. You get there and you do strike up relationships and friendships. And we would sit in the same wedge of the Senate. They put all the problem children in the same wedge. And we would talk about process and different strengths that we had. So I kind of understood the process of the Senate, and I would like to share that knowledge when it was there for our advantage. And so we cooperated really, really well. There were a couple of issues I reckon we crossed swords on, but that's stock in trade of politics, But what I realised was this, that Pauline Hanson has been beavering away for 30 years about the things that are really important to Australian people, saying the things that the major parties never wanted her to say. She's sought to work with them. They've rejected her. They put her in prison. They lied about her. The media have been terrible to her. And all of a sudden, everything she's been saying, the public are catching on to. They're going, hang on, we've been lied to by the other mobs for 2 years or for 2 decades. And we need a different approach. And I think that's what's happening right now. You know, I tried to start my own political party to anchor the Liberal Party on the right of the scale. Pauline and I were pulling in the same direction. We're trying to do it in different ways. I reckon together we're stronger.
Yep.
But full credit to her. She's the most tenacious, resilient and prescient political figure in my lifetime.
That's amazing. It seems like we call it the uni party now, the Liberal and Labor Party, especially on a federal level, have almost turned into one globalised party. And do you think that is the effects of globalisation? Do you think these parties have lost their identity and are just trying to do what everyone else is doing across overseas?
It's a really interesting point. I mean, you can go back in history and you realise that there's virtually no strength in these political parties now. They do subsume themselves to internationalist bodies. So I would say things like the World Health Organization. What happened in COVID in this country was a disgrace. Right? We know that the World Health Organization was just making stuff up. We know that Dr. Fauci was just making stuff up, right? And that would permeate over here. And the fools in government and the public service were following the science. There was no science, right? The science, actually, the only science was that these vaccines hadn't been tested adequately. There were problems with them. They covered all of that stuff up, right? The cajoling, the bullying, the intimidation, the coercion that went on towards the populace by governments and their parrots and shills in the media was an indictment on this country. And that said to me, these guys have lost their way completely. We had a state premier here, Stephen Marshall, who basically said, no, I'm not the leader anymore, and handed it over to Grant Stevens and the lady who was getting her hair done every day, even though you weren't allowed to go to a hairdresser. It just beggars belief.
Yeah, it is odd. And what makes it even darker is the fact that now we're seeing allegedly in these Epstein files a lot of connections between that the actual whole thing was a simulation.
Well, there's a lot of murk in those Epstein files, right?
Yeah.
And here's the thing, they went to great lengths not to ever release them, right? So more power to Donald Trump there, and I'm sure there's a lot of pain that's been caused to a lot of people. But the fact is, there is an operation that seems to be working outside of democratic practices. It seems to be fueled by the elite. And I tell you now, it is creeping into Australian politics. You know, isn't it amazing how a prime minister can give hundreds of millions of dollars to somebody and then miraculously when they lose, they get a job there, or they get recruited by some think tank to pay tens or hundreds of thousands of dollars for a speech when they've got really nothing to say. You know, it's particularly galling when former political leaders get out into the real world and say, this is what should be done, when they failed to do it when they were in politics. There is something really broken in politics in this country, and I think it's all around the world. And so I'm happy to play a part in a group that wants to sort of upend it and make it better.
To make that real change that, you know, everyone desires and heavily desires, there's almost a sense of putting your own life on the line. And I mean, we've seen it with, you know, Charlie Kirk, for example, his life on the line for the cause. Do you ever have those real fears? Like, if you actually want to make a fundamental change, do you ever fear that it might take something a bit more? Because otherwise, it's just kind of the same show all over and over again. What will it take to actually make that change that everyone's asking for?
Let's think about Charlie Kirk for a second. He wasn't putting his life on the line. He was going to universities to have conversations with people about his point of view versus the leftists, and the indoctrinated doofuses at the universities all over the world can't carry an argument because they're you know, know everything but don't know anything.
Yeah.
Right? So it shouldn't have been a risk to have a conversation. And we were actually talking about this today, that, you know, there will be an incident, I think, in Australia at some point where everything will change about politicians and political activists. But to use the metaphor, putting your life on the line, if you're actually going into politics and you want to really make a fist of it and buck the system and say what needs to be said, your life changes immeasurably and it changes forever. right? And I know that firsthand. For 14 years in the Senate, I never shirked the fight. I always went in for the things that I believed in. I'm clear there was, errors of judgment, mostly backing Liberal Party policy, might I say. But that sticks with you forever. And it sticks with you whether you're dealing with staff or you're applying for jobs or you want to open a bank account, any of those things, because you're deemed to be a politically exposed person. So some people don't want to deal with you. Some people will just get the headlines and they decide that they don't like you and so they don't want to work for you or don't want to employ you. So there is a real cost to speaking out and doing it. And I don't say that as a victim. I'm a big enough boy, man. I've got, I got plenty of spine and resources to deal with myself. But it costs young people dearly if they really want to make that difference.
And we saw that recently in France a couple of days ago. Quentin, 23-year-old of France, was bashed to death by a group of Antifa people in the streets. Basically, just killed him right there and there. And he was a conservative man and he was just trying to protect a few women and cost him his life. So we are seeing a pattern emerge where Antifa, the ultra-left, are becoming more and more violent, more and more radical. And they seem to hijack every cause. They hijack the Palestine cause. They hijack the whatever cause they can. They will hijack.
And you know what? They ruin everything.
Yeah.
The left, and whatever brand of left, whether Antifa left or other lefties, they go in and they try and change established institutions or good causes to reflect their poison and their rot. And more often than not, it's self-loathing. I'm sure of that. Because have you noticed how awful most of them are? They must feel terrible about themselves.
Yeah.
So I think there is going to be a continuing struggle in this space, but I feel particularly for the young ones. But let me take this point to you. As a bloke, I'm a traditionalist bloke. If I saw some thugs haranguing some women, I feel it's my obligation to step in and protect them. And I've done that on more than one occasion, and because I think it's what people should be doing. But I'll give you one example. I'm standing at the corner of Rundle Mall. There's two ladies in front of me. I won't say old ladies because they're the same age as my mother, but young women standing there in front. And a little Aboriginal woman, about 40, was screaming at them, swearing, epithets. It was really vile stuff. Everyone's just standing around, just going, oh, nothing to see here. And these women were shaking, visibly shaking. And so I thought, no, I'm not putting up with this. So I just went and inserted myself between the Aboriginal woman and the young lady, and just turned my back to the Aboriginal woman and said to this woman, look, it's okay, don't worry about it. It'll all calm down and go away. And so I walked her across the road and she said, thank you. But she was still shaking and upset. And you think, where were the men? Where were they? Where were the blokes in this country? We're all soy boys now. And why don't you stand up and protect, the things that are worth protecting?
Yeah.
And speaking up for the things that are necessary.
The only problem is, this is what I'm finding, because obviously I talked to a lot of the youth, and obviously pandemic caused a lot of people to sit on their phones and computers and stuff, and they got wrapped up into things like the NSN or this White Australia philosophy. And you did see that. You did see a clash between the NSN and Antifa crowd. Have you seen that famous video of them?
No, I haven't. No.
Okay, there's a famous video on Twitter where they basically had like a little mini war, and they just came together, and it was pretty crazy. But
well, you don't have to fight. It shouldn't be physical.
Yeah.
Goodness knows, I've had enough physical fights in my life, right, when I was a kid. But things are different now, right? They literally are. That used to be how people would solve basic arguments. It wasn't nasty. It was just blokes being dumb blokes. But now we still have to be courageous enough to have the courage of our convictions to stick up for the things that matter. And that means protecting those who are in need, being prepared to put ourselves as a man, into a position that other people perhaps are not willing to step.
Is that okay? So that's a good question then. So the Karens of this world, right? They don't want men to act like men. And when men do manly things, like maybe show a little bit of, like what you did, you step in line and you show a bit of, grit there, that can set off the Karens and say, oh, he's an evil man. He's trying to male dominate me.
But this is, okay, so that was the case.
Yeah.
That wasn't the case in this example. But yeah, it could be. If you open a door for a woman today, you don't know what reception you're going to get. If you don't open a door for a woman, you don't know what reception you're going to get either. But that doesn't mean we should stop being in the essence of courteous blokes. And blokes have a role to fulfill in the world. right? I've said this, we're here to absorb pain on behalf of those who we love or care about, and we're here to solve problems. Now, very simplistic, but you know what? As a father and as a husband, that's how I see my responsibility to my family. Solve whatever problem is there for them and absorb pain so that they don't have to, within measure, right? Because some pain is good for character building. But, you know, I would take all the woes of my family on myself as a bloke. And I think I still feel like that. And I take that attitude about solving problems and about relieving people of pain into the political battleground.
Yeah. So I guess for me, what I've witnessed, especially my generation and people in their 30s, what they find themselves is they get a girlfriend and she's very woke. She's been watching Abby Chatfield. She's been watching the Disney movies. You know, she's been indoctrinated into the system, the college. And the blokes, obviously, a lot of my friends, I'm not going to say names, they don't want to lose their misso. They don't want to like be
Name them.
Nah, I'll go later. But I'll just say it's a phenomenon that happens not just with my friendship group, but it stretches across all the generational thing. They get a girlfriend who's woke. They don't want to tip the boat. They fall in love. Yeah, they want to like, hey. So what about them? Because like these guys, a lot of them I grew up with were really conservative, and now they're all like fake woke, and I'm like, what's going on?
Well, you can still be conservative in cherishing some traditional values without upsetting your partner. First thing I'd say is, look, if you and your wife agree on everything, you know, it's not that exciting. You know, you got to have a few battlegrounds, whether it be, do you like chicken and mushrooms, or would you prefer mushroom and chicken? You know, it's but that's life is not meant to be one permanent accord about what's going on, but it's about accommodating and understanding people's different points of view. And what have we lost in this country? The ability to be mates with someone who has a different political view. And I say that not as a conservative, but the lefties do not want to have relationships with people who do not parrot their every word. They think we're evil. They think they've got some moral justification for it, and yet they can't discuss why that is the case. Yeah,
it's almost like that cult-like appeal. And you find that in every walk of life, from sports teams to social media to even things like Live Golf. Speaking of Live Golf, I mean, this state is spending a tremendous amount of money. I think it's like $4 to $5 billion of debt we're getting up to every year. You must be watching this going, this is the most debt we've ever accumulated in our history.
I think by 2028, it's meant to be 48 billion.
Yeah.
I'm just rounding up to 50 billion because I reckon it'll be 50 billion by then or thereabouts. And I look at events that are going on, the Live Golf, I look at the V8 supercars and the various other things they're putting on the Fringe every year and things like that. I understand perfectly why people like them. They think it's putting the state on the map and it's going to be some sort of, permanent entrenchment of our greatness as a place to live. The reality is it's bread and circuses. And the problem is when you run out of money, you can't put on the bread and circuses anymore. And what have we got to show for it? A massive debt and not much else. Now, this is a challenge because people really like it. They love the gather round for the footy. They love all of these things, right? But none of them would be here without government money. And you got to ask yourself, how long can we sustain this? The challenge is you've got businesses that love it because it fills the hotel rooms and gets people in the pubs and people are making money and you're entertaining people. But we have to start to think about the long-term consequences of this. Well, after the emperor, Peter Malinowskis, is gone, the bread and circuses will disappear and the state will be left with no meaningful infrastructure or facilities to help us be our better selves.
Yeah, it feels like the only thing we really got going now is the South Road project, which wasn't even a Labor thing. It was a Stephen Marshall Liberal thing. So, I mean, he's kind of just like riding off the coattails of, former governments and what they did. But this Premier, I feel like he's just a lot of hot air at the moment. And I'm just surprised that the South Australian people have been fooled by this charm. Well, I don't know. It's a superficial thing. Do you think it's just about his looks and that's all it matters?
He's a good-looking rooster. He's actually a really nice bloke. I got to tell you that too. More genuine than his predecessor by 1,000 times. The problem is he's got a Labor Party which is half inhabited by leftists, hardcore leftists, and they have to go through an accommodation. What's there? But can you blame the South Australian people? The Malinowskis government followed perhaps the worst Liberal government we've ever seen with Stephen Marshall, who did a disservice to leadership and to the state everywhere. And then he's had an opposition which hasn't raised a voice. It's had 4 opposition leaders in 4 years. They haven't managed to constructively add or oppose or shake the tree for the voice of South Australians. And little wonder the Labor government's riding high.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things I want to change.
Yeah.
I just think that the people who are involved in One Nation are very confident in their voice. They say what they mean what they say. It's an old cliche. But the fact is we do. And so we're not trampled by it or constrained by political correctness or allegiance to some false political ideology. We're just there for common sense, and we want to make things better for South Australia.
So do you think One Nation here, obviously this is some of the criticism. I want to ask you directly, One Nation, obviously Queensland is the number 1 priority. So why would they put South Australia first? Do you feel that? Or do you feel like One Nation can fulfill that South Australia first attitude?
No, well, you see, I think Queensland's not a priority for One Nation in South Australia, mate. One Nation South Australia, our priority is South Australia. And the reason people like me are on board is because I add an element of experience that can help champion that cause, and whatever strengths and skills I have, I'm happy to lend it to that wheel, right? But unashamedly, my priority is South Australia, right? At the federal level, they've got a whole country to think about, and we want to work cooperatively with those things to make sure it works. But in the end, we just want to keep punching for the people of South Australia against the people who are oppressing them and making their lives worse, and that is the Uni Party.
Yeah. We're seeing in France right now massive protests around farming in regional areas where essentially they've made deals with Argentina and South American companies to kind of bypass the regional areas in France and get food directly from cheaper locations. I do foreshadow that I think Australia will eventually do the same thing and turn its back on its regional areas and start bringing these policies like, no diesel engines and shutting down all these things that will make it almost impossible to be, a farm or in a regional area. Do you feel like you could be a stop to that? Do you feel
I do.
Yeah.
Because firstly, you have to be aware of what's going on in order to be able to oppose it. And let me tell you, the numpties in Canberra are mostly asleep at the wheel and only do what the advisors tell them. I'd say they're even numptier here in South Australia. Right, let me give you an example. This state is perhaps the preeminent seafood state, fishing state, anywhere in the country. Very close to where I live, Port Lincoln. We've got massive fishing fleet. Southeast, there's a lot there going on there as well. And yet we import more than 2/3 of our seafood. And you're thinking, why? Why are we getting prawns from Thailand that live in some squalid sewer or some fish that's being raised on a swampy farm?
Farms there as well.
Wherever, right?
Yeah.
Why are we doing that when we've got plenty of fish in the ocean here? And the problem is we've got no one fighting against the eco-bureaucrats who decide, oh, no, you can't fish there, or we're going to do this, or the fees are going to be higher. The tuna farmers now, the farmers who go and catch the fish to fatten them up, they've got to have special eco-observers on board. They've got so much compliance, which is just making it uncompetitive.
Yeah.
And so you're losing family fishing, for example, to corporates. They get to buy up licenses, they get to control catches, they get to process them offshore, take them offshore. Mate, we've got to start looking after our own.
Yeah.
I'd say the same about the farmers. Why, if you own a farm, why is it some bureaucrat in Adelaide can tell you whether you can build, a dam on it or you can clear a bit of land? Farmers are the greatest ecologists we've got. Their whole multi-generational livelihood is tied to how they look after their land. If they don't do it, they don't survive. Simple as that.
I just saw today, the Liberal Party put out a media release around the treaty that the South Australian government, after they win the election, they want to then engage in a treaty, just like Victoria and other states are doing. What would that mean for the farmers if they have to give up their lands? In terms of a treaty for Indigenous rights and all that stuff.
Here's the big problem: we don't know.
Yeah,
that's the thing. They talk about a treaty. A treaty with whom? I mean, I'm going to divorce ourselves of this notion of First Nations, right? That's a whole bunch of baloney. There were no nations here. And I remember having this argument with a lawyer, and I said, well, I think the High Court knows a bit more than you. I think it was Mabo too. They said there was no established nations, and there was another court judgment as well. That's a term that's been borrowed from the Canadian Indigenous people. I think there was one First Nation, I think the Cherokee Nation, recognised in America, right, because they actually had systems and governance. Anyone with any basic understanding of Aboriginal history in this country knows there were no nations here whatsoever. There are a series of nomadic tribes that survived on the land. They were very skilled at doing that, but it's not, a particularly proud history if you read some of the history books.
Yeah, I've seen that. Mortality rates 20% at some places.
All of those things. And, how much better off are we today in some of those issues, despite the tens of billions of dollars? We're getting, there are practical considerations here, right? For example, they're renaming streets with Aboriginal names. Now, a truckie was telling me the other day that it's actually a hazard because they don't know how to pronounce some of these names, right? And truckies actually warn other people about what's coming up. Say, oh, look, there's a fire at the corner of such and such street. Yeah, they can't pronounce the name, and so no one really knows where it is anymore.
Yeah.
That's just a very simple example of why. Why are we doing this to honour what? Something that no one knows. I'll give you another example. A bloke I know was brought in from overseas to reconstruct an Aboriginal language on the west coast. So an overseas bloke was brought in to reconstruct an Aboriginal language because no one knew about it basically before. Now, it's been resurrected or made up, I don't know, you tell me, but how can a language entirely disappear and yet be apparently hundreds, if not thousands, of the original inhabitants still proudly part of it, that part of that nation? It's nonsensical.
Yeah. So it seems like it's a virtual signaling exercise to kind of embrace, I don't know, maybe it goes back to the Karens again. Maybe the Karens just want to feel important.
Maybe. They want to feel they're doing something.
Yeah.
Right? So we're helping someone, we're doing something. But what about practical outcomes? And One Nation, I've got to tell you, is we're 100% against this race-based politics.
Yeah.
If you're in need, I'll help you, but I don't care whether your skin is brown or yellow or black or white. Right? We're there. We want to help you and give you a voice. But equally, shouldn't we be helping those who really want to help themselves?
Yeah.
There is a fundamental problem when we are encouraging a mendicant population, and maybe that's the issue. Maybe governments want the population to be dependent on them, because that gives them more authority and more power. And, I'm sure there's plenty of fiction books.
So do you think, we have the Voice Department here in South Australia, besides the referendum, obviously it was a big no, even in the state, it was all no. This government and the Premier, I guess, was trying to be the cool kid and get it through so he could look, like he's leading the edge, like he did with the under-16s social media ban. He's always trying to play this role of, I'm the guy who's always at the forefront of everything. Do you think One Nation would do well in removing the Voice Department of South Australia?
100%.
Yeah.
100%. We're committed to that. And here's the thing we put out today. We know Labor are all for this baloney. We know One Nation are all against it. What we don't know is the Liberal Party's position. The Liberal Party is kind of, maybe we keep the voice. We heard their spokesman in December of last year, Josh Teague, say he supports basically a body informing this South Australian Parliament. And so I can't work out whether the Liberals are for or against it right now. So, the battle lines are clear. There's one party that wants more of this stuff. There's one party that wants to get rid of it. That's very practical. But let's go through some facts and figures for this. They're inconvenient. About 30,000 people were eligible to vote for the Voice elections. I'm told 2,600 and something. Less than 10% of them actually voted. Someone was elected with a handful of votes. Right? And what do? Just tell me what they do. They have meetings, they get thousands of dollars in fees, it costs us $1.5 million a year. To do what? Right? If we've got 47 elected lower house members of parliament. If they can't inform the parliament about issues that are important in their electorates, what are they there for? This is the whole thing. That's what representative democracy is about. Why are we having a parallel parliament or a parallel chamber that's built around race-based rights when even the people who can participate in it are showing with numbers they don't care. They don't want to be part of it. So it's another rort. It's all follow the money, mate. That's what it's always about. Follow the money.
What do you think is going to be the 10-year outlook of South Australia this
rate?
I
don't want to be pessimistic about it. I want to try and be optimistic. But look, the trajectory is quite clear. Remember, Victoria was in the same position we were a while ago. They had bread and circuses and everyone was distracted and things were going great. The public service was growing by numbers because that works to the advantage of the government of the day. They were running up debt and saying it didn't matter. They were ideologically pursuing projects which empowered unions and various others and disadvantaged private enterprise. And where are they now? They're broke. They're putting up taxes for everyone. And, it's the quality of life in Victoria is no good.
Yeah.
Now, I don't want to see that for South Australia. And the hardships that we've got today are all a product of policy decisions taken by this government and the previous government and the one before that, right? So if we really want to provide a better future, we've got to start to think about the policy decisions we have today going forward.
So what does that look like? Say, you've won, right? You're in the upper house. One Nation has a huge, swing in their step. They're very happy. And what kind of things do you want to see?
Okay, so if we will try to get rid of the voice,
Yep.
No question about that. We want to lower the cost of living for people. How do you do that? Mel and Askers has said you can't really do it. Well, you can actually. There's some simple, practical things you can do that make access to government services less expensive, for example. I mean, at the most basic level, right? If you've got young people who are students or apprentices, why are you expecting them to pay hundreds of dollars to, have a driver's license? It's a photocopy. Sure, do the test. Why not give them their first driver's license for free? I'd save them a couple of $100, but that means a lot if you're a student. And, you can get by for 5 years with it. We can go through the electricity maze. This net zero is insane, right? It is putting up the price of power. It's making it unreliable. Where I live, we regularly have 6, 8 hours, sometimes a whole day with no power. Not simply due to the renewables, but because the infrastructure and everything else is terrible. And so we have to have diesel generators. How's that going to work with net zero? They're pushing us to electric cars. You can't get enough electricity to charge them. It's insane what they're doing, and it's been embraced. Well, hang on, the Liberal Party, I think they've on their 4th policy of it now. I'm not sure. I'm not sure which one it is, but they've just signed on it. They're too gutless to call it out. Look at it, this $30 billion investment for defence, which I welcome into the state, right? I don't care, Labor or Liberal, good on it. They're going to spend $30 billion. I'm happy it's here. That's a huge opportunity for us. We should be building a bridge to access some of the northern lands that are, really a bit harder to get to, that we can then build housing and infrastructure and things like that to, accommodate a growing city, right? But it's got to be planned and thought out. But you can't do any of that. You can't even have the industry if you haven't got electricity to do it. I'm telling you now, a battery and a few windmills and a solar farm are not going to come near to what we need for building the Orca submarine.
So in some practical ways, obviously we have a one gas-fired power station remaining, and that's planned to be closed in 2028. We've got no coal anymore, so coal's gone, and I'm not sure how much it would cost to get that going again, but it seems like a lot of money. Do you think the future might be gas in South Australia and having some sort of base load with gas, or do you think?
Yeah, look, firstly, it is expensive to build a coal-fired power station. I'm not against that in a way, because even if it is in the billions of dollars, the long-term benefit for the state would be huge. And I would rather spend a few $1 billion on that than to waste $500 million on some green hydrogen project that never saw the light of day.
Yeah.
Right? And he knew that was never going to see the light of day either. He was told by experts again and again and again. But it was an ideological obsession,
Vanity project.
Yeah, exactly. And it's cost us a huge amount of money. We know coal-fired power works. We know we've got coal here, which we could use, or we could get it from interstate and provide jobs, baseload dispatchable power, and it's still the most effective. I hope one day the federal government revisits the moratorium on nuclear energy. Let communities decide whether they want that in their neck of the woods or not. But yeah, gas is another one. And why shouldn't we be exploiting this? We export so much of this stuff overseas, coal and gas, and yet we really frowned upon from using it in this country. Just correct me if I'm wrong, didn't the Victorian government say you're not allowed to have gas appliances or something in your home?
Gas stoves and everything. And I think I want to bring it here as well.
It's insane.
I think they're already kind of implementing those policies for new homes, having gas. You can't have gas-fired, only electric induction moving forward.
Okay, so here, let me paint this picture for you. Housing is another area which is just crazy. So now there's policies that formalise, if you're building a new home, it basically has to be wheelchair accessible. So it's got to be future proof. So your bathroom's got to be big enough to get a wheelchair through the doors. The hallways have to be a certain width. Now that sounds all altruistic and really good, right? But I look at it like this. Isn't the home you're building, shouldn't you be deciding what you want in it and how it is? And given the size of land packages today, what you're going to get a garage and a hallway and nothing else on the bottom footprint. And you're going to have to go upstairs for your living and accommodation. Wheelchairs, that doesn't help much. But there's another plan, I'm sure, about it. This is about making sure that homes are available that have been developed at the expense of the individual homeowner for NDIS participants later on, right? And so it's getting, oh, well, we don't want to spend taxpayers' money doing this. We'll throw that burden onto the homeowner or the home builder. And then you look at the extra compliance attached to that. You look at the green energy ratings you've got to get for a home and a whole bunch of the construction industry training board, all of these things adding tens of thousands of dollars to building a house in this state. And for what? Let me be frank. If I want to build an energy inefficient humpy on my block of land, I should be able to do so. I've got to wear the power bills. And the only investigation when it comes to I want to sell it is some punter goes, show me your power bills. And he'll go, wow, this is a lot. I don't want to do this. Right? Why should I have to get a 6-star rating and some authorization from some quasi-government bloke whose job only exists because government says it has to, at my own expense, when housing's unaffordable enough already?
Yeah. So what I'm hearing is it's just the level of rules, and we have a rules-based society now, not a principle-based society. No. It's all about how many rules, and we're just being drowned in rules, essentially. It's
a really good point. Principle-based society is you do the right thing because it's the right thing to do, or that's what society expects from us, right? And when I was a kid, we'd have conversations occasionally about, my parents didn't get child endowment as it was at the time because, we were at a status where we didn't need it. Another kid would say, oh, my mum does. And we weren't judging. It was nothing. But there was a pride in the fact, oh, we take what we need. We didn't go on unemployment benefits because we didn't need unemployment benefits if we weren't working. Now, the whole schmeal is, what can I get out of it? Oh, this is the rule. Oh, yeah, I qualify for that. I'll take it. And you extrapolate that out. And I think that's the infection in politics today. People go into politics not looking, what can I put into it? What can I contribute to it? It's what can I get out of it?
Yeah. It's gamified.
Yeah. And what's responsible for it is these terrible lobbyists. They sit outside the political system, or critically integrated into it, I should say, in that they're affecting pre-selections. Okay, help the politicians with their fundraising, and politicians are notoriously lazy when it comes to fundraising. So they, like someone to make it easy for them. That means effectively they're bought and owned by these lobbyists.
Yeah.
The lobbyists go to them and say, "This is what I need you. I need you to meet with this person, and this is how I need you to vote on this legislation." And you know what? They do it, and it is a cancer. We see it in New South Wales. We see it in Victoria. We see it here in South Australia, and these are reprehensible activities that I think need to be stopped.
So in terms of that, we're talking about lobbying obviously being a huge issue, not just on a state level, federally, everywhere. Lobbying causes, politicians to basically be sold out. But we obviously saw here in South Australia, the Premier introduce a political donations ban.
Yeah. So
now what's happened is essentially the only way parties will get money is through votes. So it's very North Korean style of, in my opinion, probably the worst legislation I've ever seen, and most scary legislation I've ever seen in my lifetime, where it gets done by votes, because that means Labor and Liberal now will dominate in terms of...
I'm hoping they don't dominate. I'm hoping that, one nation will do pretty well. But I do agree with the principle of this. I'm not sure that public funding is the answer to the problems we have as far as political corruption or malfeasance goes. I think crooked actors are always going to do crooked things. And I think the cancer of lobbying still needs to be addressed.
So do you think it's more like a foreign lobby issue then? Because what essentially, if a lobby doesn't put Australia first and it wants to put its own business or its own nation first over Australia, I would see that as a more workable solution to then just banning lobbying in general.
No, it's not banning lobbying in general. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is I think industry associations have a particular role to play,
Yeah.
to be on the right side of politics, just like unions had a role to play on the left side of politics, right? And sometimes, they do cross over because you want to be informed. And, if the Automobile Association tells you one thing, it's to the advantage of the Automobile Association, but you have to be able to critically assess it. Where we've got a problem is where you've got political actors, people who are pulling the strings behind the scene and say to these people, I can guarantee you pre-selection because they've got numbers on their college, or they control groups within, an electoral body. When they say, oh yeah, we can attend all of your functions and make your fundraising easy and do all of this sort of stuff, you end up buying the MP. And they all say, no, that's not true. But it is true. It is, because they don't want to go against the goose that's given them the golden egg, the one that makes their life easier by fundraising, the one that tells them how to vote on legislation, and the one that is going to guarantee their continued pre-selection going forward. So make no mistake about it, it is a brutal form of political corruption. And I think it's a disgusting event, relatively modern event in politics in this country.
So what would be the solution to that? What would that look like, a world where we don't see that happening?
Well, let me tell you this. If I'm elected to the Legislative Council, I'll be going to the list of lobbyists, and I'll say, I don't want to see any client of a lobbyist, because that's paying for the privilege of trying to get access to my thing. I'll deal with industry associations, I'll deal with individuals. But if you're paying a lobbyist to get through my door, don't bother. Go somewhere else. I mean, I think that's a reasonably practical approach. I'm tired of it. You shouldn't have to pay $25,000 a month or more to get the ear of a politician if what you're pursuing is actually worthwhile. And I certainly will not be dealing with the string pullers who are trying to influence pre-selections.
Yeah, because I guess the sentiment now, and especially in this country, is that there is this, Australia is not Australia first. Australia is like a globalised country, and it's only supporting the US or China or whatever Middle Eastern country. Like there's like a sense of we don't own this country anymore, and that it's further exacerbated by the fact that young Australians can't even afford to buy homes anymore, so they don't even own this country anymore.
This is the thing. It doesn't seem like it's our country anymore. So you could say it's globalists that are there, or multinationals, or anything else. But without being too analogous, the communists tried to freeze out all the bourgeoisie, the people who were independent of the state at a point in time as well, the small business people of the time. And so it was going to be left to serfs and the elites. I reckon that's the path that we're on. Small business has been hollowed out. Big business doesn't care about who's in government, because they can afford to adapt to changes. Sure, they might be better off under one or the other, but they continue to survive. The people who are really affected by all of this are the people who are not in that elite category. So the small business owners, the people who are taking risks to try and get ahead and build a bigger business and create a better life for themselves and their families, and also those in the lower socioeconomic groups who are trying to get out of that, that have hope and aspiration. It seems like the road is blocked for them, because they go to university, get a sociology degree, which equips them for nothing except, well, nothing.
Being Karen.
Being Karen, yeah. I've got a degree in being Karen.
Yeah.
And they've got a debt to show for it, and they spend all this time not doing anything really practical except being Karen and paying back debt to the government whilst not being able to afford living a normal life.
Yeah.
That's not what we're meant to be here for.
No. And we're seeing it with birth fertility rates. It's ridiculous. In this country, it's almost extinction levels of birth fertility here. We can't even keep our own population. And now we're having, or we don't have to, but the government is going, well, mass immigration is the solution. Let's just print people in this country. Forget about our economic issues. Forget about our productivity. I mean, Australia used to have the same productivity as most European nations in the 60s.
Yep.
Now we have the same productivity level as Mongolia. So this country has literally turned to, I'll just say, shit, really. Yeah.
You go back maybe 8 decades, we were kind of, I think, at a par economically with Argentina. Right? Bountiful resources, good people. They chose one political path, which was basically the socialist path. We chose a different path. We reaped the prosperity of that right now, Argentina's chosen a different path. It's a bit difficult for them. I've got some Argentinian people that I know. It is tough for them, but the green shoots are there for them to emerge into, a more capitalistic, productive path for them. Our country's going the other way. We're picking up all the bad habits and mistakes that have happened overseas, not just Argentina, but the migration policies of the European Union and England, the lousy leftist politics that infected the United States until Donald Trump came along, the disgrace that is Canada, remember, under Trudeau. It's not much better now, but he was perhaps the most emblematic of it. We're doing all of these things. And what are our politicians doing? They're just going along with it. Mass migration is not the solution to our problems. Mass migration is the cause of a lot of our problems now. Social cohesion, the declining standard of living per capita, social dislocation and unhappiness, cost of living, access to government services, right? And it doesn't mean you have to be anti-migrant, but you have to make sure that what's happening in this country and the people who are coming here are adding to our economic, our social, and our cultural balance sheet.
And the thing I was thinking about this the other day. That's my walk to the gym, right? A big part of migration is for any country, but particularly in Australia, when you come here to this country, so like Greeks and Italians, when we came here, we had to go through a level of friction with the locals, a level of bullying, let's just say, a little, oh, you wog, you this, you that. There was like a level of sort of resistance you had to face. And part of the role of the Greeks and Italians was to be okay with this, keep their head down, keep working hard, build business, and eventually kind of become part of the nation. Sometimes it'll take you a couple of years, sometimes it'll take 30 years, right? Whatever, but eventually that would happen. The issue of mass immigration, as the level is so high per capita, that this frictional, we'll call it hazing effect, can't happen because it's too many people.
Yeah.
So the locals can't do the bullying that needs to happen. And on top of that, not even just we can't do the bullying that needs to happen, the Karens are now telling us to stop bullying. And now everyone has to get along. And it's like, oh, well, now you can't say that.
Hang on, how do you define bullying? Making a joke. I mean, making a joke at someone else's expense or making one at your own expense, right? That can be deemed bullying.
Well, it's just the banter, I think. It's the banter effect. Like, for example, it's beautiful having this, like Greeks and Italians here, like obviously being Greek, and we bring our own culture and stuff, but we're not coming to Australia to make this into Greece. We're coming to Australia to make this, to be part of Australia.
And this is the fundamental difference, right? I'm going to say that the migration policies historically were to allow people to come to this country who are fleeing either tyrannical governments, oppression, or maybe a religious discrimination in certain circumstances. But they came here for a better way of life, not to change our way of life. What's happened now is we've got people who are coming here for better welfare and benefits, right? They're not leaving the Middle East because they're being persecuted. They're leaving the Middle East because they want to come here and reap the benefits of other people's work in many instances. The Greeks, the Italians, the Europeans had an underpinning of what I would refer to as Judeo-Christian faith, right? Whether they were people of faith or not. That was what informed the laws of the time and had done for many hundreds of years. Same with the Vietnamese boat people. They were fleeing communist tyranny. So they came out here, they wanted to be left alone, right? Now, sure, it was difficult for all of them, right? And even as a second generation Italian, difficult for me at school, right? But it was part of the process of getting on with life.
Yeah.
And now things are completely different. I think it's hugely challenging. And I read something today which I think you'll find interesting. People have been hauled over the coals for saying immigration is political in this country. Well, cabinet papers from Gough Whitlam's time declared, he was there and used some F words, apparently, was that he didn't want the effing bolts, meaning the refugees from communism in the Baltic states out here because, I'm guessing, because he knew they were anti-communist and hated the left, right? So back in Whitlam's a deity on the left, right? But back in his days, they were manipulating immigration for their own political ends. And they're doing the same thing today.
Yeah. You buy votes as well. And that's another thing that in this state in South Australia, a lot of the Greeks who come here, they will keep voting Labor because that's what they were doing back then.
Yeah.
And even though it goes against them in terms of their Orthodox Christianity or whatever they believe in, a lot of these new rules are going against everything that they fundamentally, who they are, but they don't realize because they're just like, oh, we vote red every time. This is what we do.
But I can't blame everyone for that, right? Because what happens is you pick a tribe. It's like a footy team.
Yeah.
Right? You pick a tribe and you're
Stick
backing
by 'em,
them
yeah.
all the time, you know. And I'm a Carlton supporter. I tried to back for the Crows when they came in. I couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Right. My heart was always with Carlton, and I think it's a bit the same in politics in many respects. But what's happened now is things are getting so bad, right, that people are changing their vote. They're going, hang on, Team Red and Team Blue, they're the same colour. So they're looking on the left to the teals or those terrible, dangerous greens, you know.
Yeah.
But the green voters will never change, I guess. But they're looking to the teals. That's a transition away. They're looking to One Nation. And One Nation support, it comes from the Liberal Party, it comes from the Labor Party as well. Right? It's just people going, hang on, I want someone to talk about the stuff that matters to me, not the stuff that matters to them in Canberra or, you know, some esoteric lefty who's on the council. They just need practical common sense policies.
So One Nation in South Australia, One Nation in Australia. Do you guys see a future where you guys could become proper government, like, and actually have the infrastructure, have the facilities, the right people in there to run this country, or do you think it's more of just a wake up call to the major parties?
Mate, I don't like people who decide to put labels on. They say, oh, we're a party of protest. That's really lazy stuff. I mean, Pauline Hanson made the point last night that on Sky that we've got more policies on our website than the Liberal Party has on theirs. And the policies the Liberal Party is putting on their website, they're basically taking them from ours, right? What does it take to form government? You tell me. It takes a bunch of people who have the majority on the floor that are united by a common framework and ideology that is, in our case, for the betterment of everyone in South Australia. Now, there's no common framework or ideology in the Liberal Party. You don't know what they stand for. Half of them like some stuff and half of them don't. They're not united in any direction about lower taxes or anything else. What are the Labor Party united on? Well, their factions carve up the spoils of office, and they're united in, you know, their championing of the union movement, right? But it doesn't take a lot to form government except some intelligent people and some will to represent the interests of South Australia, in our case. It's the same federally. People are coming there together, you know, and you've just got to be able to distill the crap from the bureaucrats and have people with courage. They're going to take decisions that are important. And right now, everything is workshopped and tested, and the bureaucrats know they're running the show, because what happens is if a minister says, no, we're not doing that, they then leak it and say the minister's ignored the advice of experts, when the experts have got us into this mess in the first place. So we need people with courage.
So you see One Nation as becoming basically the new party. Like, we're here to stay. We're here to become. Like,
that's the
next big
intention.
dogs.
That's why I'm there.
Yeah.
I'm not there to try and become, Prime Minister or the Premier of South Australia. I'm there to help develop and train, hopefully, a whole new crop of politicians and parliamentarians going forward, so that they can understand what it's like to have the courage of your convictions, how important it is to be able to get what you want for your constituents rather than for yourself. And so, you know, I'm happy at 56-year-old with 15 years or 14 years of active political experience and another 14 years knowing how the major parties work. I'm pretty well equipped to be able to play that role within the party. Pauline Hanson, you know, tenacious, as I said, resilient, prescient. Barnaby Joyce is no shrinking violet, you know, he likes to get on. We just need more people that are prepared to stand up for what they believe in.
So, okay, let's say, you know, you have to change the society, the culture, because, for example, One Nation, yes, is doing well in the polls. But if you want to make a fundamental shift in the attitude of the people, especially the youth, and you want to get in there and provide that almost like a teacher role as well. Like, I'm going to show you how it's done, and also provide a pathway for younger people or others to come through and do something within politics. How do we do that in an environment where, you know, for the last 20 years, media has been so left-leaning, or mainstream media has been so dominant in pushing like almost like light communistic, socialistic
Yeah.
ideas, because part of politics is not just the politicians, but it's also the society and what's trending. Do you see that Australia could have a shift in its culture? Because obviously, in the 1960s, we had a 90% population of Christians. Now it's like 20 to 30%. And for me, I look at that and go, well, there's obviously a correlation between Australians being Christian and also our prosperity and our productivity versus us being more atheistic or whatever we are now. Don't even know where we sit anymore.
Mate, all of those things, it comes into religious. If you think you are the center of the universe, you'll act accordingly. If you believe there is no afterlife, you go, well, who's going to judge me when I go about the things I didn't do or the things I did do? And I think that's led to great evil in the world. And whether you're a believer or not, to think that there is something bigger than you in the world is a very humbling experience. And that's common to many of the monotheistic faiths. But there are also huge challenges, right? We have an indoctrination going through schools, political ideology, racist ideology, race-based ideology, the rainbow movement. All of this stuff is poisoning our kids.
Yeah.
Right? They come out of school. The university lecturer told me that the year 12s today have what was previously a year 9 literacy, numeracy, and logic, rationale, and abilities. So they have to spend a whole bunch of time bringing them up to speed. Everyone wins a participation ribbon. People graduate from one year to another without being able to do the most basic things. And we're saying, oh, this is okay. Well, it's not. And our focus, unashamedly, is to remove all that political ideology. We want people in our schools, for example, kids in our schools, to be proud of the country they're in.
Yeah.
Right? It's not perfect, doesn't have a perfect history, but it's pretty darn good.
Yeah.
Right? We want them to be able to read and write and do their times tables. We want them to, be able to use the internet to get facilities, but you've got to be able to reason and logic without asking AI to do the thinking for you.
Yeah.
Right? This is the essence of Western civilization, and we've lost all of that. So how do you change it? You've got to change the education system. You've got to enhance that, make it more rigorous, kick out all those who want to push all that gender BS and the political ideology through it and the racist ideology. You also want to make sure that they have access to different sources. And you mentioned the mainstream media. It's a dying thing. It's dying, unfortunately. This is where the future is. Video podcasts, audio podcasts, new media, they're having a huge impact.
Yep.
And I know my kids would rarely watch TV or to get mainstream media news.
Yeah.
They're getting it all online. I think that's actually pretty healthy. But of course, who wants to censor the internet? The Liberal and Labor parties.
Yeah.
Why? Oh, because you might hear something you don't like.
Yeah. They banned all the apps besides Blue Sky. So the only app remaining for young kids is the most woke, radical platform that's the only one that you can go on. The kids.
It's just incredible, and yet that's the one step towards censorship of almost everything, what you get to say and do. I have to say that the only Liberal I think who voted against it in the Senate was Alex Antic.
Yeah.
Who's a terrific bloke. He'd be a great addition to One Nation, don't you reckon?
Yeah. It'd be amazing.
Alex,
if you're listening, we've got to catch up soon. But yeah, do you see a future where Alex could jump on? Like, do you think Our Nation would have him?
Oh, mate, that's not for me, honestly. I'm just baiting him. I've seen some of his media appearances where he says, not yet, or something like that. The lefties would be too upset in the Liberal Party. But I mentioned him. He's the one bloke in the Liberal Party who's got the courage of his convictions.
Well, principle-based politician.
Principle-based politician, and yet his colleagues won't even talk to him.
Yeah.
It's just an appalling indictment on modern political culture. I've been where he's been. I know what he's going through. I know what he's been through. I know how hard it can be. In the end, I decided to leave and try something else. And anyway, here I am today.
Talking about the Liberal Party, actually, on a federal level, obviously they got rid of Susan Lay, or Sam, I call him Susan Gay, but Susan Lay's gone. And
is it Sussan? Because she's got 2 S's in there.
Oh, yeah, maybe she's a bit sus, so maybe that's right. But now they've brought in Angus. What do you think? What's your prediction? What do you think the Liberal Party federally are going to do?
I don't want to wish ill upon anyone, but you've got, as leaders there, you've got Jane Hume and Angus Taylor, yin and yang. Jane Hume is from the leafy suburbs of Melbourne. She was talking very disparagingly about people in regional Australia recently on Sunrise, saying she'd have to talk slower in order to, communicate with the cockies.
Yeah.
Pauline called her a snob last night on TV. And I think that will resonate with a lot of people. You've got Angus Taylor, who is undoubtedly an intelligent person, but unfortunately he's from the managerial class rather than the practical class. And when I mean that, as a business owner, you get dirty, you get mucked, you've got to implement everything. The managerial class are the people who like to tell business owners how they should go about their business. It's great in theory. The McKinseys of the world, they make a huge profit out of this. You look at EY, PwC when it was existing, and Deloitte's and so on, make huge amounts of money telling governments what to do, and look at the mess we're in. I tell this story about Angus, and I mean him no ill will, but I remember when Snowy 2.0, Malcolm Turnbull's, dream for solving climate change, it was just going to be a disaster in a basket case. So some of us were opposed to it right from the word go. And I remember Angus dutifully saying, as an expert on, management consulting, he'd never seen a better set of economic numbers than Snowy 2.0, right? It was meant to cost $2 billion. I think we're up to $16 billion. The drills are stuck in the rock. Nothing works, right? And that's what a management consultant will tell you, right? You've always got a brilliant set of numbers. Let's go for it. And that's absolute hogwash. Just use some common sense. If blokes like me knew it was just bunkum, and, you'd think that the experts would know it was bunkum, but it's just ideology.
Yeah, well, I guess it goes back to Albert Einstein's famous, saying that if you can't teach a 5-year-old something, then it's never going to work.
Yeah, well, that's true. And anyway, this one doesn't work. Malcolm Turnbull's legacy. So there's a lot of rotten eggs in the Liberal Party.
So I guess I want to ask you a few more questions before we finish this off. But in terms of your most controversial takes right now, what do you feel like are the most controversial places that Australians need to talk about, like that places we need to go in terms of conversation? What would you like to see in the public space this more?
Look, immigration is the big one.
Yeah.
And you don't have to be anti-immigration to say we've got a problem with it. Too many.
Yep.
Quality of the people that are coming here are wrong. And the system
There's doctors, engineers.
The system has been rotted. Well, you know what? I can go to India. I can become a doctor for $7,000 or $8,000.
Yeah.
And of course, Albo has told us that my degree is valid over here as well. It's just ridiculous. No reasonable human being would think that's a good idea. But anyway, that's what the Labor Party have done, and I haven't heard too much protest. We've got to talk about the reality of Islamic migration to this country.
Yeah.
I can't think of a country where more Islam has resulted in more freedom and more safety or a better quality of life in a Western contemporary sense. I went in 2008, I went to Europe to look at the impact of migration there in the Netherlands, in France, in England. All the things that I mentioned at the time have since come true. And yet the response from all the media, and I mean all the media, was what a terrible person I was. The response from the Liberal leadership at the time, what a terrible person I was, and I should shut up about it and not talk about it anymore. You become a social pariah. And yet it's the one critical issue, because you can't take it back, really. Yeah. And you can't trust the major parties on it. Pauline Hanson's been on about this for 30 years. And people might not have liked her rhetoric, but damn, she was right.
Yeah, yeah.
So you can't trust them. So that's one. The sense of hope for young people, I think, is critical. Right now, you'll know more, you're closer to them than I am, but right now I think young people have sort of given up hope of having a house and building a financial future for themselves. And so they YOLO, you only live once. They earn whatever money they do, they go out and blow it and have a good time and stuff, thinking, well, what does it matter? I'm never going to be able to buy that apartment. I'm never going to be able to get ahead. I think we've got to sort of encourage them to think differently about that. We've got to give them hope for the future and optimism that the same opportunities that I had, the same opportunities that you had and your parents had, through a bit of hard work, a bit of application, a bit of sacrifice too, let's not gild the lily there, gives you that chance of getting ahead. And I often tell, this lovely life today, but, for my wife and I, a date night was a $5 pizza, from the Australia Pizza House and a long neck of beer, and she'd have a $10 bottle of bubbly, and we'd be in the park with our kids, pushing them on the swings. That was kind of the night out, because you just didn't have money around, because we had a mortgage to pay and we had this, and you don't think you're ever going to get out of it, but you do find your way out of it. You just keep badgering away and taking opportunities as they come up. But we've got to give them that idea that in 2 years' time, they can be in a position where their home, they can have a home, whatever style it is. If
I could create an imaginary stadium and put the entire population of Australia in there, and I got you, Cory, right in the middle, and you could speak to all of Australia in one moment, what would your message be to them all right now? What do they need to hear?
Be proud of this country. Look to the future and think this is the greatest place in the world in which you can raise a family and achieve every single desire that you want. But in order to do that, you've got to think in terms of what is good for the country, and you've got to reject the people who don't want you to have that autonomy. It's as simple as that. You can decide your future, and government should get out of the way and let you make your choices.
And for all the South Australians watching this, why should they vote One Nation this upcoming election?
Well, because you've got a dominant Labor Party led by the Emperor, who, dare I say, has no clothes, and not just for the pool and PR. Sometimes it takes a child to call that out. Unfortunately, all the children are in the Liberal Party, and they're too timid to call it out. They are pathetic. They haven't got a clue. And if South Australia wants a decent voice of opposition, if South Australians want a decent voice in the Parliament, they will put people there who are going to take their voice and champion their cause come hell or high water without fear or favour. That is what One Nation offers. Our team is good. It is experienced in the sense of what I'm bringing to the table. We have people from all walks of life who care passionately about it. And look, we might not be the official opposition, but I tell you now, we will be the loudest voice of opposition. And eventually, one day, I hope we'll form governance.
Wonderful. Well, thank you so much, Cory, for joining me today and being on Turning Point Australia in the Adelaide set. And yeah, it was a fantastic chat. I really appreciate you taking the time out, and I look forward to this upcoming election. We'll be covering it also. And just so you know, you mentioned before about the policy matrix. We've actually gone ahead and asked every single political party some questions.
Well, now you're converted, aren't you? Thank you, George. That's it. That's for you. Go on.
Thank you.
Pop it on. Pop it on. So go on. There we go.
Oh, I can hold it. I'm actually not. I can hold it.
Your hair will go.
I have to be neutral, but I do appreciate. I'll say this from a personal. I do appreciate what One Nation's doing, and I appreciate the courage it takes to go out there and do this. And for you personally, I appreciate the courage it takes to leave a beautiful life. You basically living in paradise. You're like, you know what? I'm going to leave paradise. I'm going to try and fight for my state, fight for my country. So I want to acknowledge you for that, because that's a big deal.
Thank you, mate. I don't think of it as courage. I just think of it as this is a responsibility.
Yeah.
Because to those who have been given a lot, they should give a lot back. And I've still got the energy and the fire in my belly.
Yeah. Well, look, I look forward to seeing you in there. It's going to be fantastic having a Cory around, causing havoc and holding people accountable. That's one thing you're really good at doing. So it's going to change the history of South Australia forever. So I appreciate you doing that. And thank you again.
Thank you, George. And good luck with Turning Point Australia and the Adelaide set.
Thank you. God bless.
Cheers. You too.